on the two communion tables. We always have people join us online, and if you'd be turning to Nehemiah chapter 5, most of this we'll cover on our outlines, and so as we read some highlights, I'll mention more verses than I normally do, so people can follow us, because we'll have to be selective on some of these. Just real quick, we've done this before, and I didn't write this down, but the people are carried away into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. The city of Jerusalem falls, dates typically 587, 586. And as God had told the prophet Jeremiah in chapter 25 and 29, that they're going to be gone 70 years. And the original group, which included Daniel, were taken in 606. The handwriting on the wall that Daniel sees is going to take place in 539, and the Babylonian Empire falls, the Medes and the Persians take over, and as Isaiah had predicted at the end of chapter 44 and into 45, Cyrus, my anointed, and every time I read that, I don't shudder, but I just think, that's the term we think of with Jesus. But God speaks of a pagan ruler as that he's my anointed one, and he's my shepherd. And he then allows the people to come back to Jerusalem, and they come back in 536. They begin a little bit to do foundations for the temple. It stopped. God raises Haggai and Zechariah, we find in the book of Ezra, and they call the people to rise up and build. And they start building in 520 and then get the temple finished in 516. So there's two 70s. One is the 536 from 606. They're in captivity 70 years. But the temple is also destroyed and rebuilt in 70 years as well. And those are just kind of amazing things that are a part of that. I was wrong. It's 606 and 536 on the first one. God sends the scribe, Ezra, in 458, and Nehemiah, who we've been looking at, comes in 444, and he's going to stay as the governor and helps work with the things in the city for 12 years. So tonight, the city wall has been destroyed for over 140 years. Depending upon just one or two dates. Some will put 141, some will put 142, but we'll just say roughly 140 years. And it wasn't that it was all carried off and other things, but still it was broken down, and comments were made about all the rubble, and there were fires and all the undergrowth that has taken place in that particular period of time. And as we're going to see tonight, once the people finally get a mind to go back to work, this is just one of the amazing things in all the Bible. They finished this in 52 days. And again, I just think no power tools. That to me is the amazing thing, because of a part of the reason why they hadn't got anything done is all of it. It's such a huge task. And so as we're going to find, Nehemiah, as we've seen earlier, has encouraged the people. There has been some opposition, and not surprisingly, as they finish the walls, a whole new type of opposition arises. And those are the highlights of what we're going to look at. We're going to start in Nehemiah chapter 5 and verse 1. Central idea: the completion of the wall led to a new chorus of criticism of Nehemiah's leadership. Aim: I want us to chronicle the problems that kept surfacing while the wall construction continued. I'll leave you just to anticipate this, because obviously we're going to talk about criticism. And I've mentioned this a while back, but on 3 different occasions, and if you know me very well, this really doesn't offend me at all, but on 3 different occasions, someone has come up after a lesson and it just said, I honestly think you are the worst preacher I've ever heard in my life. So what do you say to somebody in a time like that? and just kind of put that on the back burner. And, you've done the very best you could that particular day. And this person, well, it's happened 3 different times. And so what's going to be the response? And where we're going to be ending up today is that anytime we're about the Lord's work, at some point, and it's never just planned and systematic, but at some point, they're either going to be, my middle daughter uses the word detractors, sometimes referred to as the peanut gallery. And she says, Father, they have put their 25 cents in the communion plate so they can say whatever they want to about what's taking place. And it doesn't matter what's going on. At some point, there's going to be detractors. And here we are involved in probably the biggest kind of single-handed building project in the Old Testament, probably outside of the ark. And I still try to imagine Noah and 3 sons and whoever else helped them. And some estimates are they're going to spend up to 100 years building the ark. But outside of that, here's this huge building project under very difficult circumstances. And in the middle of it, then there's going to be detractors, there's going to be criticism. And I know Charles, having worked in the church, will be surprised that sometimes happens, but we'll come to that in a little bit when we get to that. Chapter 5 and verse 1. And like I said, we'll do some highlights if you're reading along at home. While this project is underway, there arose a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers. We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, our houses to get grain because, and look at this, there is a famine that has been going on. Verse 4, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields, our vineyards, yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards. Now, this building time is not going to be very long. In other words, we're talking about a little over 2 months. But at the same time, all of the men who normally would be out in fields, vineyards, and working in other things have been brought in or involved in the building project. And it's just very interesting. In a lot of households, the wives have been taken care of, and you fill in the blank, the family farm, the other things. And what we're finding is that a famine has taken place. They're stretched in terms of paying taxes or whatever, and Jewish brethren, against what has been taught in the law, are demanding high interest rates, and when people can't pay, then they're actually selling fellow Jewish children into slavery to pay for these unpaid bills. And again, here's something else as well. No matter how good a project may be, at any given time, things are going to come up that have to be dealt with. And to just ignore this is really to ignore the needs of the people. And something I want you to start, and we'll come to this at the end. What good is a wall if you don't have very many people to live inside of it because they're all in slavery? And so as important as the project is, the people who live within the city have to be more important than just the project itself. And if you've been in the church very long, sometimes we can get so involved in some things that we may overlook something. And remember, as early as Acts chapter 6, what is it? Oh, the Hellenistic widows are being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. And the church is growing, and we're reaching people, and on and on. And then it's like, whoops, let's put everything on hold for a second. And rather than ignoring this, or rather than saying, well, that's not really too bad, then they're going to stop and take the problem on head on. So we're in chapter 5 and verse 6. I was very angry when I heard their outcry in these words. And this is to me a really important insight. I took counsel within myself. I brought charges against the nobles and officials, and I said to them, you are exacting interest each from his brother. And I held a great assembly against them. Verse 9. The thing you are doing is not good. Ought you not to walk in the fear of our God, to prevent the taunts of the nations of our enemies? Moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain, less abandon this extracting of interest. Return to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive orchards, their houses, and the percentage of money, grain, wine, and oil that you have been extracting from them. And then they said, we will restore these and require nothing from them. We will do as you say. And I called the priests and made them swear to do as they had promised. I shook out from the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out every man from his house and from his labor who does not keep his promise, so he may be shaken out and emptied. And the assembly said, Amen, praise the Lord. And the people did as they promised. So the other thing that we've mentioned, and this to me is still just such a major thing, we're going to see dimensions a little bit later, and it's going to be a distance between two, some will say is the wall, as far as 2.5 miles, but while there's some variety there, what is very consistent, and just kind of start getting this in mind, the walls are going to be 8 foot thick or wide, however you want to say it, and they're going to be 40 foot high. So just kind of start thinking, up to here somewhere, I'm talking about starting from the ground, getting things up to where you can kind of reach and build that part, that's going to be one thing. I asked Greg, our green banner is 10 foot. So do 4 of those, and that's how high the wall's going to end up being. Do you see what I'm saying? Every 10 feet that you go up is going to be more labor and more trouble and more work and everything else. And it's not just this. We're going to go 8 foot this way, 40 foot this way, and we're going to be close to 2 miles going around the city. Anticipate this, and they didn't do this just exactly when they finish it, but toward the end of the book, they're going to have this service, ceremony of thanking God for the completion, and they meet on top of the wall. So you just kind of put that into place in terms of just the magnitude of what we're looking at in terms of the building and the project that's there. So we're in 5:14. From the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, 12 years, I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governors. The former governors who before me laid heavy burdens on the people took their daily ration, 40 shekels of silver. Their servants lorded it over them. I did not do so because of the fear of God. I also perceived in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Therefore, or moreover, at my table, he's going to feed 150 men at his table from the allowance that's been given to him by the Persian king, and you'll see more details after verse 17. I did not demand the food allowance of the governor because the service was too heavy on the people. Remember for my good, O my God, all that I've done for this people. We've been introduced to Sanballat, who's going to be from Samaria, pardon me. And Tobiah, who is under him. And if you just look through the book of Nehemiah, Sanballat is mentioned 10 times, and of all things, Tobiah is going to be mentioned 15. So Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and look what he refers to them. The rest of our enemies heard that I had built a wall and there was no breach left in it, although up to that time I had not set the doors and the gates. They sent a message and said, come, let us meet together. And they gave a designation, but they intended to do me harm. And I sent messengers saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? And there's going to be 2 or 3 of these attempts to either physically to harm him or to discredit him. And reading through this is what I wonder. I wonder if they're thinking, well, if we get the walls completed and we finally have the security of the city, if we can discredit or even destroy the governor who's there, then we'll be able to use the city for ourselves. And because there have been no walls, as we're going to see, there's a lot of relationships that have been formed within the exiles. 4 times they sent messages, and I answered the same. And the 5th time, so we're in verse 5 of chapter 6, Sanballat sent servants with an open letter. It was written, "You and the Jews tend to rebel. That's why you're building the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. Now come and let us take counsel together." And I sent to him saying, "No such thing as you say has been done, for you are inventing them out of your mind." And they all wanted to frighten us, thinking, "Their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands." So he goes into another house. He's kind of confined, and you get the idea that there's a sense of danger. He's in a sense of physical danger here. Yes, he may be the governor, but there's a lot of influence through these people. And there is, let's say it this way, there's a lot of opposition on the outside, but those who are on the outside have a lot of friends on the inside of the city. And so for a period of time, he is in this house, and they say, "Let's meet together in the house of God," calling him out of a personal house, "and within the temple, let's close the doors. They're coming to kill you." And I said, "Should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I should go to the temple and live? I will not go in." I understood that God hadn't sent them, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him, and he was hired so that I would be afraid, act in this way, and they would give me a bad name. So this is just a part of the criticism. And so as we're close to getting the walls completed, and we now have that finishing touches of getting the gates put in to secure the city, a number of these attempts are made to either to discourage, to discredit, and it looks like from this even to kill Nehemiah. And those are the things that he's facing while he's doing this. This is my favorite verse in these 3 chapters, 6:15. "So the wall was finished." And I read this and just kind of go, it's a minor thing in comparison to this, but each year as the wheat harvest starts, and I never did do this, but I had some friends that did. They start cutting in South Texas, and some crews will cut all the way to Canada as the wheat ripens all along the way. And Dad typically had about 300 acres of wheat. And when it gets really, really golden brown and it's ready, 2 or 3 really bad things can happen. One, it can rain, and the ground's too wet to harvest it. And at some point, it can start falling over. If it gets hailed with little hail, it will shell it and all the grains will fall on the ground, and the heads will just be here waving like this. And a big hail, it'll get knocked down. So all these bad things can happen. And as soon as the wheat harvest stops, nothing else goes on. We don't go fishing. We don't fix anything. We don't do anything else. You work night and day, because until you get all of that in, then all of these things can happen to it. And then when that's finally all finished, everybody just kind of goes, and you just look at the magnitude of what they have taken on. This hasn't been done in 140 years. And Nehemiah comes back, organizes the people, and as we said last week, you start up toward the temple on the north end, and you go counterclockwise, and there's going to be 10 gates built around the city, 41 sections of the walls, and people, a lot of them build close to their house, and this is just absolutely amazing. In 52 days, at least to some level of completion, then they have done what has not been done in 140 years. And inside of me, I'm just going, yay, just excited for them that they finally got that finish. So we're in 6:16. When all of our enemies heard of it, and the nations around us were afraid. They fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. And here they are again. I mean, this happens in the ministry of Jesus. Sometimes read the Gospel of John and just watch on this side. As faith starts to increase, the opposition level from Satan increases, finally to the point that they crucify him. And you just read through John, and as soon as faith starts being developed in people, then the criticism, he's a Samaritan. He's demon-possessed. And finally they're going to kill him, literally. And so in a similar way, here we are to the point that the physical object is being achieved, but the criticism and the attempt to discredit Nehemiah is going to intensify even some more. So we're in 6:17. In those days, the nobles of Judah, did you hear that? We've got enemies on the outside, but what are we talking about now? We're talking about some of the rulers on the inside. On the inside. So what's this? In those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For in Judah, let's read back, for many in Judah were bound by an oath to him. And this is the part where you shake your head. He was the son-in-law. So here's the archenemy, and he has married a Jewish girl whose family is involved in the rebuilding, but the archenemy, Tobiah, is the son-in-law of Shechaniah, and his son has taken the daughter of, and you want to pronounce Meshullam, for his wife. And so here our archenemy and his son are married to Jewish women. You see what I'm saying in terms of all the influence and the contact that goes back? And many of the nobles have sworn an oath of allegiance to the right-hand man of the ruler from Samaria. And a part of you just kind of does this on yours and just think, how could this be going on? So these nobles speak of Tobiah's good deeds in my presence, and they reported my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid. I mean, you just can't make this up. So here's the chief enemy. His wife and daughter-in-law are Jewish exiles. He has rulers in Judah who are pledging kind of allegiance to him, and they're giving a good word to Nehemiah from one of his chief enemies, who in fact is wanting to kill him. And so not only is the opposition outside the wall, but now that we're getting the wall completed, look at the opposition that has taken place on the inside. Nehemiah 7, and there's a long list in here. We'll highlight a few things here. The wall had been built, and I had set the doors, and the gatekeepers and the singers and the Levites had been appointed. And a quick reminder, do you remember all the way back when Nehemiah is the cupbearer, and he goes in before the king, and he actually prays before he makes the request? Part of what moved him to do this was the report, one, that the walls have been broken down, and they've been broken down since 587, 586, but the city gates have all been burnt. And so one of the things that he does very judiciously is that he requests lumber supplies through and from the Persian king, knowing that to have the walls of the city with no lumber for the gates is not going to accomplish anything. It's a death trap. And so from the very beginning, then Nehemiah has had the foresight to help organize the supplies for the lumber. And so at this time, then we finally have the walls built, and through the help of the Persians, then the lumber's been supplied, because if you have 40-foot high walls that are 8 foot thick, the point of attack for the enemy is going to be the gates. And that's why finally getting those in place, is going to be the kind of the icing on the cake to finish this up. But here we are in verse 2, chapter 7, verse 2. I gave my brother Hananiah, the governor of the castle, charge over Jerusalem. He was a more God-fearing, faithful and God-fearing man than many. Don't open the gates until the sun is hot. And then while they're standing guard, shut them and bar the gates. Appoint guards among the inhabitants of Jerusalem, some of their guard posts and some in front of their house. And the city was wide and large, but the people within were few, and no houses had been rebuilt. And this isn't going to happen yet, but we're going to have, I'll probably say we'll call it a lottery, but we'll come to this. There's going to be a drawing for people to move from the city areas that are in the countryside so that there's a larger population actually living in the city. So we're just going to do some highlights, and you'll see when you're reading chapter 7, there's a long, long list of these people. But you've heard this refrain, and we'll have a couple more nights to talk about this. God put it in my heart. And here's a man, outside of Daniel, that is as prayerful and as intentional in seeking the will of God as virtually anybody in the Old Testament. This is just a constant part of his life. And he says, God put it into my heart to assemble the nobles and the officials of the people to be enrolled by genealogy. And I found the book of genealogy of those who came up at first, and I found written in it. And I'd ask a question on the previous page that I didn't get to. Why do we have these lists of genealogies in the Old Testament? And especially toward the end, Chronicles and these others. Well, a part of it, as we're going to see, at a certain point in time, because this happened with Ezra, it's going to happen again when we get to the end of Nehemiah. The people start intermarrying, and for you to be able to stay, especially within Jerusalem, but to stay within Judaism, you have to be able to prove from your family tree that you have family descendants. And if it can't be found, and we saw this last week, these priests will be put aside until there's the unum and thummim, where the priest is going to ask God. But all of these genealogies and these long, long lists that are kind of tedious for us to read, and we're not going to read great details, but this is really important because this is how you establish residency. This is how, with all the intermarrying and the other stuff, that you're able to say, yes, we're legitimate and we're able to stay. So here's just the highlights of the groups. Chapter 7, verse 7, a long list of the men of the people of Israel. Chapter 7:39, the priests. 43, the Levites. And 44 is the singers, the sons of Asaph. We're going to run out of time to do this because if we'd had a little more time, I'll do this at another time. Here's something you can just do. You can do this with a concordance. But if you get a concordance and go back, David is going to appoint singers from the house of Asaph to sing in the original temple in 1000. Where are we today? 444. Here is a family that we can account for 600 years of faithfulness. I wouldn't try to tell your kids this, they wouldn't get it. But the family of Asaph are the Jacksons and the Osmonds of the Hebrew family. These are families that have worshiped and praised and sung God for 600 years. And you read through the book of Psalms, and you'll come to an entire book that the first 9 or 10 are from the family of Asaph. And I just have to shake the chills down, because what other family in the Bible, yes, we know David's descendants, but I'm talking about the family. But what other family can you trace that are faithfully worshiping God for 600 years? Growing up in a clan in the Sarah church, there were about 40 of us who were directly related. And we lived 10 miles out of town. And when we had our week-long meeting on 7 o'clock on the nights, we had a 7 o'clock devotional service. for a week. And you just start adding up. You milk 6 to 8 cows, feed the pigs, the chickens, get out of your chore shows, have breakfast, drive 10 miles into town to get there by 7 o'clock. And our family just never missed. But in our family, as soon as your voice changed a little bit and you could sing tenor, then you were to sit by Lance's grandfather, Uncle Herbert. And so you sang, as long as your voice could sing tenor, then you literally went and sat with Uncle Herbert. And then if your voice changed a little bit and you could sing bass, then you went and sat with Granddad Luther because he sang bass. And ladies, if you could sing alto, then you went and sat with Aunt Nancy. And so in our family, as you came to church, then we were divided up to be able to do that. The lady who taught music, we sang the Hallelujah chorus every Christmas from the 7th grade through the 12th grade. And the Sarah Church of Christ, I mean the 25 or 30 kids, could sing the Hallelujah chorus on Wednesday night in a snowstorm, because singing had just been such an important part of our lives. And I'll leave you, Lord willing, we'll come back to this at another time, but you get a concordance out and look up Asaph and look at this family, and it's just a short mention here in chapter 744, but this is an amazing group of people, and we can account for 600 years of faithfulness of this one family. That part was free. Verse 45, gatekeepers, 46, temple servants, Solomon's servants, and here it comes. Those who could not prove their father's house, nor their descendant, whether they belonged to Israel, and then here comes the whole list of them. Verse 46, these sought their registration among those enrolled in the genealogies, but it was not found there, so they were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor told them they were not to partake of the holy food until a priest with the Urim and the Thummim should arise, and they would be asking God, and he would give indication if they were a part of this. And so that's why these genealogies are all there, and why they're so important, because that's the basis for establishing, especially among the priests and the Levites, those who were there. So here's 766. The whole assembly was 42,360. Male and female servants, 7,337. 245 singers, male and female. So you're just under 50,000 people that are registered and are counted for. Good on you, Nehemiah. 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. Let's just kind of do the whole list while we're doing the count. And this is just kind of a reckoning. Again, these are the exiles who have returned. So here's some points that we'll work with as we close. We've mentioned this, but it's just a minor miracle that in the 140-year-old debris that this call, let's rise up and build, comes. And once they finally get started and kind of get off dead center, they complete the project in 52 days. Absolutely amazing. And I just ran this off, and like I said, the length of the walls, this is the one that varies the most. But the height, just under 40 feet. The average thickness is 8.2 feet. And the distance around the city will vary between 2. Some will, depending, will do 2.5 miles. And as we said, this is smaller than Solomon and David's Jerusalem. We don't have as many people both to defend and to protect. Some of the areas would be harder to rebuild, so they shortened that and they built on high places that would make it harder for the enemy to try to capture the city. So when you look at 2, and we mentioned this as we came to it, but Tobiah the Ammonite had married into his family, and with his family ties, he had secured from the allies an oath of allegiance of many of the nobles of Judah. I just kind of read through this and just kind of go, oh dear, how could this take place? And this is why I have such admiration for Nehemiah, because he's got very specific, visible enemies on the outside. And then he's got a whole group of people on the inside that have intermarried with those very people, and they're trying to undermine him while he's involved in working in this project. So, for good reason, as we began, there was a pause in building the wall to deal with the wealthy exiles who were charging interest, in some cases selling fellow exiles into slavery. And Nehemiah sets the example, and he's going to encourage everybody to pitch in. What good is a wall if, due to famine, high interest rates, the amount of time away from family concerns and farming, the land while you build the wall and your family sold into slavery? Scott, can you come up just for a second? Can you come up just for a second? You want to say anything? I just need you to help me just a second. Yeah, just come stand right here. Scott's going to be one of my three brethren who just told me that I'm the worst preacher in the world.
I did not.
No, you're just here as a help. What do you say to someone who, after you've just done the best you can, says that? I reach out and shake their hand and congratulate them for their perceptiveness. Not everyone is as perceptive as you are, and did you know that the trying of your faith worketh patience? And let patience have its perfect work, so that it may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And if you're struggling through my sermon tonight has helped you to build Christian character, then I'm really glad that you endured and that you were able to grow in your Christian character by being here tonight. My wife says you're sick. I'm not going to change their mind. Why have a fight with them? And fair enough, if they have struggled through this to get through the lesson and they have developed character because of their perseverance, then I have helped them to grow in Christ's likeness and in producing character, even if they've struggled to get through the lesson. Different people are attracted to different personalities and types. I've been in different churches in Australia, and the Australians have come up and said, "You're the American preacher. We were waiting for you to yell." And we waited. "But you're an American. You're going to yell at us here in a little bit." And we waited, and we waited. "You never did yell at us." I said, "No. My grandfather never raised his voice. We were called Mr. and Mrs. and treated with respect. And sometimes the people who need to be yelled at are surprised when people talk at them with a lower voice." We're all different. Some people need to be yelled at. I'm not the one to sin to do that. And here's Nehemiah doing the best that he can. And as we're going to see, his focus is going to be, let's continue on doing the Lord's work as we understand it, rather than being distracted and detracted by our detractors. So here's number 4, Sanballat and Tobiah. They have a great deal of influence. We have all these different relationships, and Nehemiah comes in and upsets the whole apple cart. The city's been wide open. They can come and go. There's no walls or anything. This is kind of like their second home. The walls are going up. They have influence within the leading people, and here comes a governor who won't recognize that. And I did this in 4:2. To these leaders who were the poster children of the perennial problem of national identity, and as we're going to see, they had tried intermarrying in the time of Ezra. He's going to call them out of that, and guess what? Nehemiah is going to go back home for a while and come back, and by the time we get to the end of Nehemiah, they're intermarrying again. And they're saying, no, we can't do this. And encourage you, if you haven't done this recently, read the book of Malachi, because Malachi is dealing with the very same type of issues in the same period of time, and you can look in that. So you'll see number 5, there's a great attempt to discredit Nehemiah, and they're going to try to, one, prevent the project goes ahead, then they're trying to discredit and possibly even to kill him in the process. So here's number 6, and you can differ with this, but this is my perspective. There are times when a good work is being criticized that the best thing to do is to keep working and to leave God with the responsibility for handling the negative opposition. This to me is really important because we're all human. And we all have some sense of feelings, but Let me say it this way. I've seen some people who've gotten so involved in being defensive or being offensive to these people that they've got completely off track. And I think the majority of the time, I would prefer, if we're doing the right thing and this is what needs to be done, let's go straight ahead with that and let God deal with that. Nehemiah, the God of heaven will make us prosper. I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it to come to you? Lord willing, our next Wednesday night Old Testament classes are going to, and we will do Esther first and then Ruth. Jerry at 5 o'clock says, I prefer to stay with the Persians, and so we'll do Esther. One of my favorite verses in Esther is that, what does her uncle say to her? Who knows whether or not you have come to what? The kingdom for such a time as this. And I was thinking about that with Esther today, and I'm thinking, isn't that true of Nehemiah? Because he was the cupbearer and he has face-to-face access to the king, and he's trusted, and he hears the news about what has taken place, and nothing has been done for 140 years. God put him in this position for such a time as this. And so the people are finally going to have the security of the walls and the things that are around them. So here's the last two thoughts, 7:2. In a little over 7 weeks, Nehemiah overcame internal despair and external opposition to raise not just a physical wall, but the self-respect of his people in the eyes of the surrounding nations. And here's a quote from Mr. Williamson. The repetition of genealogies during this time show that those who populated the physical city of God stood in direct continuity with the community who had earlier experienced God's redemption in the second Exodus. Quotations, second Exodus, 900 miles, 500 miles as the crow flies across the desert. You can't take a group of people, so they have to go all the way up the Euphrates, and God's going to bring this handful of exiles back from captivity, exactly like he told Jeremiah, 70 years they're going to be coming back. And so he used that expression, like God delivered the people originally out of Egypt, then God's, and both Ezekiel and Jeremiah will refer to the north country. The first Exodus was from the south, and God's going to redeem this handful of people. 2,000 years earlier, Abraham, let's count the stars tonight. And if you can count the stars, you can count your children. And here's going to come this amazing genealogy in chapter 1. And I think every time we see a new person born into Christ, as happened this last week, another part of the stars of heaven is being fulfilled to Abraham. But to fulfill that and the promise to David, one of your descendants will sit on the throne, we have to have the bloodline that continues all the way through. And that's a part of what these guys are going to help accomplish. Remember, bricks and mortar and organization is helpful. The Church of Christ is neither founded nor maintained by physical things alone. It is those who've experienced the grace of God for themselves, who became members of Christ's bride, the New Jerusalem. Occasionally, if it's on, I watch, especially the first part of the Field of Dreams. And the part I want to get to is when the reporter, and it's imaginary, but what does he do? He gets to go out into the cornfield to see that, if you've seen the thing. And the next time you watch that, just look at the expression on his face as he's getting ready to go do that. And as I asked my son once, I said, may he help me with the dimensions of Jerusalem as given in Revelation. And he said, Dad, from Oklahoma City, it's 90 miles past Los Angeles. You then go up to Alaska, you go across into Canada, and then you come back, and that's the base. And it's a cube. The same dimensions of the Holy of Holies in the original tabernacle, the Holy of Holies in the temple, and while it's expanded, the correlation and the dimensions the parallels are the same. And that's why it is a Holy of Holies, a holy place with holy angels waiting for a holy people. And I wonder what it's going to be like to step out onto streets of gold.